Hi, it's Rob from the Brush and Boltgun. Today I'm going to be doing a tutorial on how to paint Hyperphase Reap blades using only 2 colours and 1 shade. It's a very quick and easy method of doing them, but the results look great. If you'd like to support the channel, our Ko-fi and Patreon pages are linked below. Now on to the video. The first colour we're going to do is Citadel Moot Green. We're just going to give the whole blade a nice smooth coat of this. Now, depending on what your undercoat is, you may need to give it a layer or 2. Because this one's metallic, it does sometimes slide the paint around a little bit and leave it a little bit streaky. But just giving it another coat should sort that out. So we're going to be speeding through the layers on this, so they will be speeded up, but you'll be able to see exactly what's happening on each one. So with that layer done, we are now going to use a little bit of Citadel Biel-Tan green. I'm going to just use this over the areas where you've got those recesses and the patterns on the blade. The only reason we're just doing it in these areas rather than doing the whole thing is because we're going to have to get that back to the smooth moot green around those areas. So you don't want it to be going too far out. If you want to pin shade it by just doing the actual recesses themselves, that's fine. But I tend to do it like that and then just use a little bit of moot green to touch up the outsides. You might notice it spreading a little bit from the inside there because it's not quite dry, that Biel-Tan green. There's a few little wet bits left. Smooth down that blade so you've got that nice flat moot green. Then we can move on to the next layer. Now we're going to start highlighting and getting those lighter shades onto the blade. So to that we're going to use a little bit of Vallejo White and we're going to mix that with the moot green just to get a slightly lighter shade than the moot green. And you're going to break up the blades into, depending on how big it is, maybe 3 or in this case 5 separate patches where you're going to use this. Basically what this is going to be is the very top of the blade there, you're going to have the lighter shade, which is going to be a final coat of white at the very tip of the blade, going down to the moot green colour, with this being the first highlight of the moot green. So we're doing the top, the bottom, the middle, and then the 2 bits in between in this colour. So on the outside blade edge, you've got lighter green, moot green, lighter green, moot green. And then a final piece of lighter green at the bottom. Then on that flatter part at the middle, like nearest the arm, you have the moot green, lighter green, moot green, lighter green, moot green. So now we've added a little bit more white to the previous mix, and we're highlighting those parts again, but leaving some of the previous highlight showing at each end of it. So these bits in the middle here, like the very central part, and then the 2 bits that we're doing here, you're going to have a little bit of the previous layer at either end, and at the top and the bottom you're just going to have that previous shade at one end of it. And then the whole process is basically just adding white to the previous mix all the way through, leaving the previous layers on show at either one or both ends depending on where it is on the blade. I'm mainly just showing this outside side of the blade getting painted up, because the inside I'm doing exactly the same. As you can see, it's just highlighting these bits, so occasionally you'll see part of it getting done, other times you won't. Once more, we're adding white to the previous mix, and we're just continuing with that method that we've used of highlighting the previous part, leaving the previous layers at one end or both ends depending on which section of blade it is. There, I'm just adding some of the previous layers just at the top there because I thought that section looked a bit too small. Once more, adding a little tiny bit of Vallejo White to the previous mix. That doesn't have to be Vallejo White, it's just the white that I tend to use at all times. But if you use a different one, that is fine. A little bit more Vallejo White here being added to the previous mix, and this is a really light one. We've only got one more layer of highlights before it become pure white. So this is almost the white layer at the very end of it, but that will be the last layer we do. So adding a little bit more white to the previous mix once more. You can see that now that's almost gleaming white. It is just ever so slightly off, because the final layer on this video is adding that final white bit to it, and also the white edges to all of those little sections, just to break that up and make the details stand out on that blade. So previously, where I've used black and mixed that with the Moot green, it's taken a while and it's looked a little bit messy, but now what I've started doing is using Citadel Biel-Tan green, because what you can do is get a little bit on the brush and basically drag it so that where you take the brush off, it pools. So you're dragging it from the thin section that you want to be Moot green, and then taking the brush off on the area you want it to be darkest. Now you can see up the top there, that is quite a smooth transition from the Moot green down to the very darker bit. We are going to be playing with a bit more Biel-Tan green. You can see on the bottom here it pools a bit too much, and there's quite a distinct line where that darker patch is, but we will be blending that in by using a little bit of Biel-Tan green in a few more layers. So basically all you're doing is you're adding the Biel-Tan green to the sections that are going to be darkest. Now because the way you're doing it here, it will pool a little bit. You want to try and find the point where it's going to pool and become shiny, because you don't want that shine, and you don't want it to dry and look a little bit funky. So now we're going to do another layer of Biel-Tan green, and you're going to start that a little bit further down than the previous layer and just darken that in. You can see where we had that pool of Biel-Tan green at the bottom of the blade. That is now blended in with the section next to it. Going to use Biel-Tan green once more. And this is just to add some final darkness to those middle sections. Also just adding a little touch here, because I haven't really done much with that part, because we've just shown the blade and how you want to do that blade. Now we're just going to use some pure white. All we're going to use this for is doing the final highlights on the very edges of those blades where it's gone to the lightest point. We're just going to add some white to that. We're also going to be using this to do the edges of the blades, and also those sections of the blades where you have the kind of details, those little recesses that are nice dark Biel-Tan green colour. And you're just going to go around all of the edges on the blade and all of the details on the blade, just to make sure that they stand out with a little bit of pure white. Slightly off camera here. We are still doing the highlights to the blade. So now I'm going to start working on the edges and the details on it. So what I tend to do is get a little bit of paint on the brush, try and get any excess off so you don't get any little splodges like I just did there. And you're just going to rub the side of the brush along the edge. Now when you're doing these ridges and you're actually painting them on, you want to be dragging the brush away from the tip, doing it in really small sections, trying to get that to line up nicely, just so that you get that nice white line separating the blade edge and the flat piece of the blade at the back. That really makes that stand out, and then once you've got these on, that does kind of show the dark and the light on the different sections of blade, and I think it looks quite cool when you've done that. You're going to gently drag that around each of these sections, just picking out all the details. Just going to go around each of these, slightly off camera here unfortunately, but we are just going around each of those sections, adding that white edge highlight to it. Finished, your Hyperphase Reap blade should look something like that. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you have, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future content. Also, think about subscribing to some of our other social media, link below. Thanks very much. If you like the channel and you enjoy the content and you'd like to support us, our Ko-fi and Patreon pages are linked below. Thanks very much.